De Transformatie Podcast wordt mede mogelijk gemaakt door Love Fit Food, het platform voor bewust eten, leven en trainen zonder bullshit. Nootrofit, webshop voor natuurlijke voedingssupplementen en trainingsmaterialen voor Total Human Optimization en 12 Waves, de online training voor zakelijke en persoonlijke groei.
Did you all see the one in Texas from yesterday or the day before in the news?
Yeah, I've read about it.
It's about an hour away from where I live.
That must be so weird to realize.
You know what's fucked up is that it's not. It's like
Really?
they're so. It's kind of bizarre that they're so commonplace these days that. I'm just kind of like, well, there's another one. And I'm in Austin, and, South by Southwest is a massive music festival. I'm not sure if you all are familiar with that. But basically like 300,000 or 400,000 people come in for the week or 2 weeks to the city for that. So think of 300 or 400. It's pretty insane. Anyway, a couple of years ago, someone just like went crazy and drove their car down a closed street that was full of pedestrians and killed a bunch of people. And I was actually talking this morning with a friend of mine at breakfast. This is the most hilariously like Texas thing. This is such a cliche, but it's actually like one of a cliche that I actually love. So a couple of years ago, there was a guy that lost his shit and got a machine gun and started like kind of shooting randomly downtown. And the Austin Police Department is building downtown. And so he was across the street shooting at the front of the police department, and he was like blowing out the windows and stuff like that. So in a lot of this in the States, in Austin, there's some police actually patrol on horseback. Because it's easier for, with the closed streets, there's a lot of pedestrians. That way they can kind of like, it's easy to get around and have a good vantage point view-wise. Anyway, so this officer was actually putting away his police horse. So in one hand, he had the reins of his horse, and he was standing there. This guy opens fire across the street with a machine gun. With the other hand, this officer pulled out his pistol and shot the guy across the street and killed him with one single shot. So he's fucking holding a horse with one hand and just pulls his pistol out and shot this guy.
In my head, this guy was wearing a cowboy hat and he had a revolver, because this is the most American thing I ever heard.
Hey, that makes both of them. Like, I was hoping to say, as little as I like the cowboy, cliche, I was like, I so hope that guy was wearing a cowboy hat.
And cowboy boots and a big buckle.
Totally. It's like the one time where that cliche is completely badass.
Yeah. Hey, but you said you didn't lose your shit over the fact that something terrible like that happened so close. Is that because it's really so commonplace? Because we look at it in the news and we see all the stuff happening. But at the same time, in Europe, we see an increase in terror attacks. And one of my buddies who lives in Barcelona, where they recently did some nasty stuff on the Ramblas, he was very close to that one. And that made me realize, oh man, this shit is really getting closer. And it made me a little bit paranoid about that. There's nothing of that going on in your mind?
No. I mean, think about, I'm 35. And so the first massive international shooting incident was Columbine in Colorado, where I'm sure you guys have seen that.
Yeah.
And so that was, even at the time, I remember it was kind of surreal, but there's been so many just like fucked up shootings here that sadly I've just got pretty used to it. And like, it doesn't mean that I don't, like the thing in Las Vegas just a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Is some guy like shooting with a machine gun out of a hotel window. that a crowd full of people, it's tragic and it's horrific, but you get kind of, or at least me anyway, like you get kind of numb to desensitized just to the frequency of how often that they happen. And so combination of that and also my issues and acceptance of my own mortality, I think maybe is why I don't feel, but mainly I think it's just I think it's just the frequency. When are we going to start the podcast? Is this the podcast?
This is the podcast.
Okay.
No, we're just going to talk about shooting people in the States and smoking pots in Amsterdam, and that's it. No. No.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
let's say your name correctly. Is it Janet?
Yeah, that's correct. Most Americans or English, they struggle with it a little bit, and they say
if you pronounce it,
they say S Janet. But I think you say it correctly. In the Netherlands, you would say Jeanette.
Yeah.
No, but Janet
sounds like an Altekra album.
A what kind of album? Yeah,
Altekra.
Well, it's a good way to kick off the podcast then officially. So welcome, Cory. Really, really happy that you're here. Would you mind introducing yourself for the people that do not know you?
Sure. Hi, I'm Cory. And I have a podcast called the Astral Hustle. Just exploring the human condition from a variety of different angles. I am a meditation teacher, an author, a composer, and a music producer. And I have a sweet honey bear voice.
You do. Yeah, no denying that. You get that feedback a lot, that you have a pleasant voice to listen to?
What's funny you say that is because literally every podcast for probably, I don't know, a year, people would start that by saying that to me before we started recording. Like, you have a great voice. It's funny that, like, to tell someone what they already are, like, it's, you see someone who's tall, like, wow, you're really tall.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, sure am. But I think I mentioned it enough, like on podcasts, where I would say that people say that to me, that people got the idea, like the message that, oh yeah, he probably is aware of that.
Yeah,
I do appreciate it. It's sweet that people say that.
Yeah, and probably they like your laugh as well.
Yeah, well, this is also a funny thing. I was just talking about this yesterday, is that, like, I tend to laugh at the things I'm saying, and I see people comment on it, or people like send me little messages where they say, oh, I like your laugh because it's like, it's I don't know, soothing, or like something like that, or it makes them feel warm and fuzzy. But I saw this comment recently where someone said, I don't like it whenever Cory laughs because it sounds like he's indulging in his own cleverness or something like that. But to me, it's completely the opposite. It's that I am observing the arising of my thoughts, just kind of like everyone else. And so some of the ridiculous things that bubbles up in my mind, it catches me off guard too. And so I'm laughing at how ridiculous the river of my consciousness is as I am perceiving it in real time. So I'm just one of the members of the audience listening to the Cory mouth talk, and I hear funny things and I laugh at them.
Yeah, that's maybe, I was wondering about that because you do podcasts. Do you listen to your own podcasts?
No, I actually don't really listen to podcasts. I listen to, like, Your Mom's House, which I like that one a lot. It's completely filthy and ridiculous. I enjoy, like, Bill Burr's podcast sometimes, and listen to Rogan every once again if there's a good guest. But yeah, that's really about it. Like, I have good intentions with podcasts. Like, I'll have, I subscribe to Sam Harris's podcast and things like that. And I always want to click on it, but I just never do. Like, it comes up in my feed and I intend to, but it's really a matter of, like, time. And I spend so much, like, time in the critical thought zone that I think I just reach for things that are funny and that are just light and and goofy. And really, like, my, honestly, at the root of my mind is just silliness and like comedy. As it gets filtered through everything, it turns into like rather sincere ideas on critical thinking and things of that nature. But that's mainly my engine runs on laughs.
Yeah. Well, humor is important, man. But the reason because I wanted to know was because you laugh at your internal processes while you're doing them. And I was wondering if you ever heard yourself say stuff that made you giggle, or that you're like, oh yeah, that's so typically me. Because every now and then I listen back to some recordings and I actually have to, laugh at my own reactions. And I was wondering if that was like a common experience amongst podcasters.
Oh yeah. I've done that a couple of times, like where I have gone back and like reviewed a podcast later to remember an idea or something like that, and I'll completely forget the conversation, because if it's a couple of weeks or a few months later, and I'll listen to it and I'm like, well, one, I'm like, I actually sound like I know what I'm talking about, and then two, I will hear shit where I'm just like, what is wrong with me? Like, where did that even come from? Yeah. I totally feel you. I definitely do that too.
Yeah. I can imagine. I find it interesting that you sort of dodge the heavy podcast, because your podcast, I did a review of the kind of guests you have. It's kind of, it's hard thinking, the kind of stuff that you talk about. How did that come into existence? When did you decide, well, this is my theme? I'm at home here talking about this stuff.
Yeah. That is what I naturally think about as far as that one side of my mind. I've joked before about like kind of having my mind broken down into the profound and the profane. One side is, deeply contemplating the human condition, and the other side is thinking about some ridiculous like shit joke. And so,
sounds really like well balanced.
Yeah, it is. And so anyway, I understand that, like, as far as externalizing things for the public, that I would want to offer out to the public, I know that ultimately what I find the most value would be is in the more critical thinking things. So that's why that's the direction of the show. And at the end of the day, the philosophical take on things is going to overpower, what I express as far as the over the comical things. And so, so that's how the podcast really came in that direction. I've always been interested in these topics. Like whenever I was born, came out of the womb, had a little beard and glasses and a little book on postmodern philosophy.
Giggling all the way.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, I did. One of the things my mom told me was that when I was born and the nurse was holding me right after I was born, that I peed in her face. And I was like, that's a pretty apropos, just type of symbolism there. Anyway, so just all of my friends have seemed to be interesting, and I always have these in-depth interesting conversations exploring different ideas and just things that are coming up in my mind naturally throughout the day. And so one of my friends, Aubrey, has a podcast, and so he asked me to come on his podcast. I actually was the first guest on his podcast because I helped him like set up his gear, and then we like did a test, and then that was his first guest. And so then I just kind of would make these appearances now. I don't know, I've been on there like 15 or 20 times or something. And over the years of doing that, he has a big audience. And so his fans and followers started connecting with me on social media and saying like, hey, you should really start your own podcast. And so after a couple of years, by overwhelming popular demand, no, just, enough people hit me up, and I thought, I have all these cool conversations with my friends. It might be fun to just share them with people. So I started doing that. And then, of course, that branched out to getting guests and things like that.
Yeah, you did do the binaural beats for him as well. Actually, I that's think how we connected. I actually tagged you in one of my Insta stories. I listen to it sometimes before I go to sleep, and yeah, I think so. That's and you responded to it, and Michel just was like, "No, you should ask him. Just invite him. You know, what the heck? What can happen?" I'm like, "No, I mean, this is Cory Allen." And now here we are. So,
well, you know, one of the things I was told, yeah, here we are. And thank you again for having me. One of the things I was told growing up was the answer is always no if you don't ask.
Yeah. Sometimes it takes a little guts. You just have to ask. You already have a no. You can only get a yes.
Yeah. And I mean, what's going to happen if this is a good idea just for life in general, like as far as self-belief and self-limiting thoughts. Like I tend to like to fast forward it to the maximalist like outcome of potential, right? So if there's something you want to do or something you want to acquire or achieve or whatever it is in life, like, you know, if you say, I wish this person would come on my podcast, or, you know, I want to go on a date with this person or whatever it might be, or I want to interview perhaps with this job or something like that and get a different position. Like, you're going to die, right? That's the macro view of things. So what's worse than that? You might as well, you might as well go for it, whatever it is. And whatever the outcome is, it's only going to learn, as long as you have the right mindset, it's only going to lead to you learning about yourself, learning about like, okay, if the thing didn't work out, like, how could I have approached that differently? Was I prepared enough? You know, how did I communicate what I was thinking or what my intention was? And oftentimes we only see the successes, you know, public successes that people have. But a lot of, you know, everybody has failures. Everyone has things that, not failures, but things that didn't work out all the time. But you only see the 1 out of 10 things that go well. And so you're not alone in not instantly achieving the thing that you're going after. And honestly, I think that those things that whenever we're striving to accomplish and grow and increase, you know, our life, that striving is the thing that actually builds the character that builds you into the person who, you know, is someone who people want to talk to.
Yeah, I agree. Just yesterday evening, we hosted a seminar and we talked about like lifestyle design and achieving your goals. And one of the ladies in the audience, she was like, "Yeah, well, what if I fail? And then my dream is shattered." And I'm like, "No, your dream is not shattered. Your dream actually is becoming more clear because now you know what didn't work or what path not to take." It's a different mindset how you approach it. And I think it's funny you say we're going to die, because it sounds a little bit like a scarcity mindset, but you turn it into the opposite. It shows you like abundance, I guess, to maximize every minute that you have.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, like, I think that there is an odd hesitancy and fear that people have, and some people call that a fear of success, which, like, I'm not so sure about that. Or maybe it's just me that I don't fit that, you know, that paradigm or whatever. But I don't know. I feel like we have basically we have the luck of being a wave of consciousness that slipped into this weird fleshy meat suit that's floating in the middle of infinity, right? So that's a bonus. And so our intention and our mind is existing in an ocean of chaos, and we have such this limited moment of time to be able to experience our own awareness of our awareness. And so we might as well go for it and try and enjoy and really don't give a fuck and just try and, you know, live our dream life. Because why in the world would you want to look back and think, I should have done this, I should have, you know, tried to live my life in this way, or I should have I wish I would have gone to that for that thing? Because I think that that's really what like hell is hell being on the cusp of death with a mind full of regrets.
Yeah, very powerful. I totally agree. And what made me thinking is also, how did you develop this viewpoint? Because it's, I think it's not the mindset that most people have. Actually, not most people that, well, that I come across. Maybe I should pick pick my surroundings differently, but because most people do, they don't live in the now. They live in the past and look back and what if and I should have, and then in the future as well. I want this or I need this or it should be different. Was it something that was like inherent in your personality, or how did you develop this? I think what I'm asking is, how did you get into meditation in a more broader sense?
Well, so how did I get into that I suppose fearless mindset is the way I would look at it. And it's not fearless in the sense of like warrior cockiness or something. It's literally just the acceptance of my own mortality, where it's like, all right, well, here we are. Like, I might as well, like, there's nothing to lose. The only thing that there is to lose in life is your own illusion of your self-identification. You know what I mean? So whenever people have fear of going towards that job or that date or like living their dream or whatever it is that they're trying to do, that they're worried about being denied on, nothing is lost except for your own idea of who you are. So if you have, as far as your ego goes, if you're, gently manicuring and protecting your ego from getting some type of, information that might tell you that you're not perfect or that you're not this godly type of deity, then that's going to create fear because your ego is challenged whenever you become rejected. But if you understand that, like, you are that your ego is this normalized thing across the species of all humans. We all have these our pluses, our faults. We all have the good and bad sides of who we are and what have you. And so getting rejected or whatever it might be doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter unless you're fragile, unless your ego is fragile and you're attached to it so much that that rejection is going to challenge your own idea of who you are. So I think that's why I have no problem with those things, is just because I've spent the time working on and accepting the fact that I am just little juicy meat pod flowing through time and space, and it's no big deal. And that life, it's just as fun and as free as you allow yourself to be. Like the clinging and the tension and the anxiety and the worry of daily life is all self-imposed. It's the expansion comes from an awareness of the clenching of one's own mind and body, and that clenching comes from fear of the future and the fear of our self-identified image being smashed up against unarguable reality, like cheese moving through a cheese grater. And, so that's what you have to wrestle with. But once you wrestle with that shit, then you're all good. You're impenetrable because there's nothing to penetrate. There's simply just the acceptance of what is. But please go ahead.
No. No, I was just I don't know how long I've been meditating, but it feels like you have this in the beginning, this little moments where you totally feel this and see this and have these aha moments. And it can happen to me when I'm listening or to like a spiritual teacher or some podcast or in my own meditation, or Actually, I like walking meditation also as well. I'm like looking for little moments in the day to just focus. I particularly like to focus on my heartbeat instead of my breath, because it makes me feel my body even more. And then I try to feel if I'm under stress or not. But you can check in with your heartbeat to see, like, okay, how am I doing? And
that sounds like a great love song too, by the way. Check in with your heartbeat.
It probably is a song if you can find something on Spotify, I'm sure.
This should have been made.
Oh, I know. It's oh babe, I'm feeling the heat. Let me check in with your heartbeat.
And there we go.
Instant classic.
You're a composer.
Anyway, I'm sorry. So you're checking with your heartbeat. That's really cool. Yeah, I like that on the walk.
Yeah, and also like when I wake up, or like when I'm still in bed or trying to go to sleep, or just little moments in the day. And this state of consciousness that you talk about, it seems to me at the moment quite unstable. So sometimes it's here, and then you get lost into normal routine and normal life. And how do you manage this? Is this like a state that you're like constantly in, or did it grow?
I was kicked in the head by a horse one time, and ever since then it's been smooth sailing.
Hold on,
it's something.
Yeah. I'm running outside now looking for horses that can kick me.
It's something of course I cultivated over time. You know, I started really in my teenage years with a lot of anxiety, a lot of anxiety about just my own existence. And I really went through hell as a young boy, and all the experiences I went through. And one of the things I was going to say, as far as kind of seizing the moment, is, I did a lot of psychedelics whenever I was a teenager. A lot of my friends, I had several friends die from drug overdoses whenever I was in, middle school, pre-high school even. My father died whenever I was 20, out of nowhere. So I had a lot of death, that I was close to. I remember watching my grandfather die as like a little boy, all these things, and just kind of seeing and just a lot of other really extreme life experiences happened to me pretty young. And what it did was it really put a punctuation mark on the finite nature of our own existence. Right? So it showed me that, like, this thing has an off switch, and what really matters is what you do now. And the more that it made me become driven, and also, having a single mother, my parents separated whenever I was really young. And so basically my mom was just like clawing mother and I, and it was like we were both complete maniacs. And so her trying to raise two boys and just like working crazy hours all the time just to make sure that we had a place to live and have food and all this stuff, watching that made me really respect the grind and the hustle and how hard she worked. And it showed me that, like, if you want or have to do something, then you have to really grind for it, and you have to go for it. And I feel like the combination of just growing up in those circumstances, plus just a lot of other extreme experience, made it to where I realized, like, the time is now. And because we've got one life, and if we want to do something, it's not going to happen to you. You have to go do it. And I think both of those things mixed, and in my, I did have a natural proclivity towards thinking larger, and there's a lot of, I could share a couple of little stories that point to that are sort of cute. Whenever I was a little kid, I remember thinking that like Santa Claus was bullshit. And so I asked my mom, and I'm not sure, you know, in Europe if this is a thing, but you can go and like talk to Santa Claus. In America, they'll have like at the mall or something, they'll have like a little thing where you can take little kids and they can go talk to someone dressed up in a Santa Claus costume. Mm-hmm. So I told my mom I wanted to go do that. And she said, all right. So I told her I wanted one thing for Christmas. And then whenever I went and talked to Santa Claus, I told him I wanted a different thing as a test to see which one arrived on Christmas morning, because I thought, you know, I was like 6 years old or something, as a test to see which one, a little empirical evidence. So then whenever the one that I told my mom was what showed up, I was like, this is bullshit. Yep. And then I would do things like whenever I was at school, like waiting for my mom to pick me up as a little kid, I would like watch the cars coming in the driveway area. And I would say, like, if there's a God, the next one that comes will be my mom. And they're like, no, that's not it. I'm like, all right, now this time, if there's a God, the next one that comes will be my mom. And I was like, no, that's not it. Anyway, so I always had this, you know, kind of way of thinking to a degree. I
have a question about that, though.
Please.
Was that something that, I mean, did you notice that that was something different in relation to the kids your own age? Because I don't get the feeling that this is the common 6-year-old experience figuring out the scientific method by yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No. I was always so in my own head and like still kind of remain to, you know, to a degree to be, that I never even really wondered, or it never occurred to me to even ask someone else if that was normal. I just talked as if it was. And then a lot of that stuff I just simply didn't share because, I don't know, it was just like my own internal measuring thing that I was following and interested in. And I wasn't really too interested if other people were sharing that experience or not. So
it's interesting. It's actually a topic I've been contemplating a little bit recently. I just did a meditation course, small, like a retreat. And he made us do a couple of exercises to make us, we'll just call it aware of your consciousness. And one of the takeaways was, don't try so hard. And I'm wondering, like, okay, I think I am aware, but how do you know, like, if there's not some state that could be even more aware? It's difficult to explain, because it seems like some of the exercises you do is to observe your own thoughts. And I feel like I've been doing that for almost all my life, or have that capacity. I don't know. It just comes natural. And then you do those exercises and you try to observe the observance of your own thoughts. Like, okay, am I now digging too deep? Or am I just not like doing it correctly? Like, but you can never know, but you can never ever look in someone else's head. Like, okay, let me see. How is this for you? Like, is it like, and sometimes I just wish that would be possible, like just to check, like, okay, which level of awareness or observance am I at, or is there more to it than this?
Well, I think I know what you mean. And I would say that there's always more levels of awareness. If you ever feel like you've reached peak level of awareness, then that's a for sure sign that your ego has taken control over the mainframe of your operating system. Because there's always more you can be aware of. Think of even just knowledge, you know, because like the way that we think of things, the way that we conceptualize our ideas, which ultimately create our consciousness, is based in symbols, right? So we assign meaning to symbols, and that symbol represents things in our life, and the collection of that symbols creates the picture of our consciousness and how we relate to the external world. And so even if you say you had maximum level of nervous system awareness which one you'd probably go insane and kill yourself, your head would explode or something. Let's say you had that and you were still balanced, even whenever you learned new information each day, because we're always learning things, even small things each day. That would change the relationship between the symbol value systems of all of those things, the trillions of things that create the image of your consciousness. So it's not so much about awareness, it's to some degrees, but it's about also perspective of the way that you look at what you know is always changing. So I don't believe that there's ever an endpoint of levels of awareness. And I don't know that one should strive for an endpoint. I think that it's just one should strive for a state of opening and a state of dilation, because that as a goal is a well-intentioned goal that will keep one from A, diluting themselves, and B, getting lost in the labyrinth of gnashing teeth of their own ego and things of that nature.
And then probably adding some like friendly curiosity to it as well in that open state.
Oh, hell yeah. Friendly curiosity is what it's all about. That because that wonder is really a great drug. It's what, and it's natural in all of us too, which is great. It's like that's what makes us human, is we want to know what's on the other side of the mountain.
Like I want to know what's like behind the thoughts or behind the perception or the awareness. One of the other things that triggered me, what you said before, you said like, I realized that I had to go out and do it myself. How does this relate to like a non-dual view of the world? Like if everything's just happening and moving and you don't have free will or some wiggle room, I think you tend to describe it. Can you go out and live your dreams and do it, or should we just like sit back, relax, and let it all happen?
Well, I mean, you can sit back and relax and let it all happen, but what happens might not be what you want to happen. You know what I mean? So, the thing is that you, as far as your will, is that there's your intent and what you desire, what you want to create or do, and that's a projection, right? That's a frontal cortex like theory in your mind, a visionary type of thing. And then there's the chaos of the universe, which gives zero fucks about you or your intention. And what reality is whenever your intention rubs up against chaos, and that's what comes into existence. The challenge that people find is that they believe that their projection of what will be is what is. And so people get disappointed, or they get discouraged, or they feel like something isn't working out, because they get this conception of how they would like to see things unfold, but they don't take into account that whenever they try and execute that perception, it has to mix and blend with the chaos of universe. And so it will inevitably shift and change, because it's the fire that's created from the friction of everything and from your mind rubbing together. But that's what all reality is. And so being flexible and learning how to like bend with the path and be open to, the change of how things are unfolding, and be able to watch those and get to where you can identify the actual better paths that unfold. That's one of the things that I've gotten to being open to and really thriving on, is like, I'll have an idea of how I want something to be, or how I'd like to see something awaken in the world. I'll take my will and try to execute it as well as I possibly can. As I see it shifting, as it begins to emerge in and mix with the universe, I see it shifting and changing. I watch how it's shifting and changing, and see, better potentials than what I was initially envisioning begin to unfold, or pathways in which that can unfold, and then change my intent to a degree to fit the truth that exists outside of my mind and that actually exists in objectivity.
It almost sounds like magic if you explain it like that, man. You make something that comes from your mind, you create that into existence. I have a question about that, though, in regarding to free will, because I like the description and analogy you use with the rubbing against chaos, and in the fire there you create reality. The going towards the fire or remaining at home, staying safe, is that something you have agency over in the way you look at free will with all the information you've gathered about the topic?
Yeah, I think so, but it's sort of like, it's funny is that people ask me about free will all the time, and I love talking about it, but I feel like the listeners, they hate it because it's such a fucked up thing no one wants to think about because it's so, it just...
That's the reason you should think about it.
Yeah.
No, I love... I totally agree with you. And it's like, because it just pounds the ego into dust whenever you talk about free will or not having it.
But I hear you saying that there's actually some agency involved, because I've talked a lot about free will, and I've landed on the determinism, outcome. It's like the universe is a deterministic universe. So yeah, the goodbye ego. But I'm always looking for that, like I heard Jeanette say, wiggle room. And I'm very curious about your view on it, because if there is some agency, my ego would love that.
Well, allow me to serve your ego up a tasty morsel. So, so I think that there's, it's both. And I know maybe it sounds frustrating, but I think it's because we are living in a deterministic universe, but we can choose our choices within that deterministic universe. Because, like, look at it like this. So everything's chaos, but you can guide chaos. If it's like a sailboat in the middle of the ocean. It's all just unfolding and happening. But if you put up a sail, you can begin to kind of guide it in one direction. That's as far as the outside of yourself goes with your body in the world, because we have a finite number of like neural synapses and past experiences and ways that we can, based on memory response and knowledge and information and all these type of things that we can use to make decisions. But those decisions are natural behaviors from our culture, our parents, free will. Just as whenever you're painting a painting, you have these blobs of paint on a palette that you can put your paintbrush in and paint with. Now, that palette and those blobs of paint on the palette, that's your mind. So there's a limited, number of choices there, but there are choices that you can make based on what's on that palette. So you can paint whatever picture you want, but you only get to use the paint that's on your palette. Is it like, we are within a deterministic universe. However, we can choose our choices to try and change the sail of our sailboat.
And by your decisions is largely influenced by all these other factors. Like, for instance, what you ate that morning can have an effect on what you decide to do later on in the day. And when you start looking at those things and really start, letting it sink in what that means, that's where I walk into the mindfuck of, well, I don't think I'm as free as I think I am. And the only real evidence we have for free will is the fact that it feels like free will. But, that might be something that the mind makes up afterwards. And if you talk or if you listen to people like, for example, Sam Harris or neurosurgeons, they all tend to go that way a little. How do you balance that out if you think about these things?
Oh yeah, no. My theory is that the alien invasion isn't coming from. And please take it. This is a joke, just for anyone that I don't want to take me seriously. The alien invasion is not coming from outer space, but it's coming from inner space. We're expecting it, aliens to come from ships and coming through the sky because we anthropomorphize the universe. But really, it's the flora in our stomachs are all communicating and taking control of each of us. So they're coming from within us and controlling our minds and then communicating psychically to each other from one gut to another until they're growing and growing. That's why the population of the human race is expanding, because their mind controlling is making us all increase the span and the amount of humans on Earth so there can be more receptacles for flora. And then once there's enough flora that can latch on to the actual Earth itself and thrive, it will discard the vehicles, which are humans, that are necessary. And then the Earth will be one giant bountiful ball of bacteria.
That sounds like a horror story, man.
but really, yeah, it is so bizarre, man, like what you're talking about. And I do think about that, or at least my stomach makes me think about that.
Yeah.
In that, yeah, like these studies of some of the more cutting edge neuroscience, and this is sort of why on my show I've started bringing out a lot more neuroscientists and things like that. Mm-hmm. And as a side note to this side note, one of my favorite pastimes is asking neuroscientists what a thought is, because they all go, it's so fucking weird to like predicate your entire life and like 2 decades of a academic career around thinking. But the thoughts, they're not exactly sure what they are. So it's like, here's all this research and all these books and like decades and, walls of degrees around neuroscience. Cool. So what's the thing that's the foundation for your entire life of study? I'm not really sure right now, So I like asking what the thought, but it's also just fun in general because I'm curious. So every time I ask them, like, what is the thought? They're all like, that's a good question. Which whenever someone says that's a good question, oftentimes, that means they don't have an answer. And that's a stalling technique for them. It's like a nice redirecting anyway. So, so some of that research about like how they're actually discovering that there's multiple, what we would call subconscious narratives happening in our brain all the time. So they've said 4 to 6 different subconscious narratives are occurring, and actually what we experience as our self-reflective, self-awareness, what we think we're thinking, is sort of this synergistic mixture of aspects of each of those subconscious linear thought patterns. And so like an example I use that I often to explain that is, and I've taken this out of, I think it's in Sam Harris's Waking Up book, was he's talking about this very thing. And he's saying how, you could be sitting there and you say you've quit smoking and you're sitting there and you're kind of wanting a cigarette, but you're trying to be good. And then you think, this store on the corner down here has like the best apples. I'm going to go get one of those. And so you go down there and you go to the produce section and you get an apple and you have a lovely apple and you're going to the cash register. And then you're there and you're like, all right, I'm going to grab a pack of cigarettes while I'm here. And this is the last pack. So they're saying like, well, really it's the whole time is this story that your mind is, the subconscious thing is really directing you to go get a pack of cigarettes, but it's creating a story for your own self-aware mind to believe the illusion, to get there via this other story. So, man, it's really the conclusion is that it's just, we don't know, we don't know. I think that's what is being worked on right now as far as how our biology is controlling us, and as far as how that relates to our free will, man, who the fuck knows? I think that nothing is ever black or white. I think it's always going to be this, as far as these things go. I think it's always a mixture of a lot of different imperatives and happenstances. And so I think that it's, man, it's this huge combination of just question marks and intent.
Yeah, I agree, man. But there's probably a reason why we are so fascinated with it. I mean, the whole aspect of consciousness. I mean, if you look at this planet and what sets us apart from, well, at least some of the other animals and life that's here, is that we get to think about these things. And you just said something interesting, like the alien invasion is not going to come from the outside. But if you look at the universe, and you said some interesting things about floating through space and stuff like that. So I guess you're aware about the complexity of the universe and what we're seeing around us with planets and, astronomy. How do you look at that? Like, do you believe that we might be, are we special in the universe, or is there more consciousness out there like us? How do you feel about that?
Well, I don't think we're special in a sense of like coziness, warm and fuzziness. I think we're unique in the sense that, well, as far as we can tell, we're the only thing like us within arm's length throughout the cosmos right now. That's unique. But also, like, ants are really unique too, and so are like cows and oxygen and carbon. Those things are unique too. So it's like, we're as interesting as all that stuff is to me, and as unique as all that stuff. I don't think there's anything particularly special about humans, because the value system that we base our specialness quotients on are created by us. So therefore, of course, we'll be the most interesting. But I think if you asked a Komodo dragon what was the most interesting thing, it doesn't give a shit or even recognize that humans are a thing. It's like, oh, there's a warm thing I could bite real quick and poison and then eat alive, like I do other warm things that I see.
And then we're back at the beginning when you mentioned we are all just like projections, maybe of just consciousness, or not projections.
I probably said something like we're a wave of consciousness trapped in some little meat spacesuit.
Yeah, but and the rest of the world as well. All it's damn it. See when I want try to make a smart comment and I'm lost for words.
No, it's all good. And honestly, I think that the simplicity, and this is, a laugh coming from me. I think simplicity is often the wisest, way of things. And so I look at things like saying, damn it, as an exclamation for not being able to think of what to say, is actually one of the most richest and incomplete philosophical descriptions of the human experience.
Yeah.
That's a very Zen thing. Just be like, damn it. That is a beautifully Zen statement. One of my favorites is I was talking about this recently as far as Zen goes, and it illustrates, I think, maybe what you were getting at is, and let's see if I can remember this properly, but I think translates to like frog, jump, pond, plop. And that's really what existence is. It's just a happening, and I think that's maybe perhaps where you're going with it. I was really hedging my bets there. I said maybe, perhaps, where you were going with it.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Probably, maybe, hopefully, perhaps, where you're going with it is that, we're all it's all just here.
Yeah.
And so, as far as back to the other question is like here-ness in the context of the cosmos. It's interesting that we're these little, pink monkeys that are aware of our own existence. That's pretty interesting. But what are your guys' thought on the origin of the universe?
Well, that's no small question, but
well, is this the small question podcast?
No.
We also haven't been easy on him, so it suits you to ask us as well.
Yeah, you can only fall back on questions of that magnitude. You can really only fall back on what science has, sort of discovered. And if I look at what we know about, for instance, the Big Bang and stuff like that, and the complexity of the universe, then, hey man, I don't know, but it's all a little too perfect if you ask me. You know what I mean?
I agree.
this particular universe has a configuration that allows for this kind of consciousness to arise. And I've been told that the particular settings you need for that are so unique that, for example, if suns would only convert helium a little less than they do right now in this universe, there would be, I believe, no iron or something very critical for life. And either we're very lucky and we're sort of an iteration here, that this happens all the time and we're just in a good one, or it's sort of by design, which could be as well. And I'm a sober guy, and I don't know if I believe in a God per se, but if you look at all the variables, well, it's pretty special.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I also think that as far as a God goes, I mean, the fact that people would think that an omnipotent being would look anything like a human is just a testament to people.
Yeah, our arrogance. I agree.
It's going to have a face, and having a face is a very human idea.
And the beard.
And the beard. That's why.
Obviously.
Yeah. The Big Bang Theory is fun. I like it. It's pretty, but again, it's like you can get into the Infinite Turtles thing with that. It's like, well, what was before the Big Bang? I did put forward I posited a theory of the behind the curtain, like what was before the Big Bang one time. Happy to share it with you real quick. I'm glad you said you don't believe in God, because Christians don't really like this one. So my theory is that, like, as far as we can, again, this is also a joke, but so the theory is, humans, we all anthropomorphize everything all the time. We make everything like us. So we assume that a God would be like us as far as our sensibilities and our own natural ways of thinking. So picture being a God, and you're in this infinitely black space of the universe, or outside of the universe or something. And you think, well, I'm omnipotent and I can do whatever I want. So they're hanging around for, 10 trillion years or something like that. And if we're looking at human behavior and it's a guy, we can probably get a good sense of what he's doing for a while out there. So
there was no internet porn at that point.
Right. Well, he could just create and destroy anything he wants. Right?
True. Yeah.
Why would he stay alone for like that long a time,
exactly. Though? Right. So he's creating and destroying all of these goddesses for eons. But if you think about, if you were a human and you're in a huge warehouse with like a little bit, maybe hardly any electricity, just a small light, and you can command and do anything you want in that warehouse, that would be fun for about 10 minutes, right? So like, I'm omnipotent, I'm all powerful within this warehouse, but it's really boring. And then another year goes by and you get more bored, and then you begin to go kind of crazy. And then eventually, because of the way that we naturally have a defiance over authority, we decide, you know what? I'd rather die than live alone in this black warehouse for another 10 years or another 20 years or whatever. So as would God be, as he is existing in the middle of infinity, be like, you know what, I've screwed around, no pun intended, for as long as I can. And my omnipotence, the only way I'll overcome my own omnipotence, to usurp my own authority over myself and infinity, is to destroy myself. So as the person might kill themselves because they don't want to live in the warehouse any longer, the God pulls out or manifests some type of gun, puts it to his brain, pulls the trigger, blows his brains out, and the explosion of the fragments of his brain spread across what we understand as the cosmos on all of the planets, and that was the Big Bang that created our solar system.
That is amazing. Do you know The Last Question by Isaac Asimov?
No.
Because it's a short story that he wrote about the ending of the universe and the reappearance of the universe, and it's almost exactly what you describe right now. It's like humankind is evolving technologically, and we get to join this like matrix, which is like in sort of subspace, and our civilization goes on past almost the heat death of the universe, and then the last human joins the collective that's in like this subspace. And just when it does that, so because it doesn't want to live in that dark warehouse that you mentioned anymore, like this dead space, the stars are all gone, it joins that collective. And then all of a sudden, as it does that, there's this, the last line is "let there be light," and it all starts again. Nice. Which is very similar to what you just said, man.
Nice. What's that called again?
The Last Question by Isaac Asimov. It's like a 15-minute read or something. It's
cool.
It's a great story. Yeah.
I'm going to check it out. Anyway, so I don't know. That's how I think the universe started.
I have a question about the nature of the universe in regard to psychedelics, because you mentioned that you experimented with those. I think you didn't, ayahuasca and DMT, you're no stranger to those. I always wondered, the DMT and the psychedelic experience, are you tapping into your own subconscious, or are you actually tapping into something bigger?
Well, that's another one of those questions that are, it's open for interpretation. I think that people, and again, I give the answer that crushes the hope and dreams of most people. A lot of times, I think everyone wants to think that we're tapping into another layer of the cosmos, and who knows, perhaps. But people will talk about seeing God and touching God and the divine nerve cell of everything whenever they're on psychedelics, and that's fine. I hope that serves them well. My take on that is that if you were able to, like, you're trapped as far as your own mind goes and what you can experience as a human being by your own nervous system. So to experience a God that's outside of yourself isn't possible, because the thing that is generating the story of your consciousness, which you're able to be self-aware of, is the mainframe of your nervous system. So it isn't possible to experience objectivity outside of what is the thing that's creating the electrical impulses that creates your own awareness of what you're experiencing. But I do think that what we experience in those states are and the same in meditation too, and the arising of images and pictures and during meditation is an access to the symbols of our subconscious. And I think that the threshold between subconscious and conscious awareness becomes malleable and a bit murky, and you can push through the membrane a little bit, or maybe those things start arising. I've described it like crates floating in the ocean, giant shipping crates. And as the water is flowing, those things are bobbing up and down in the water. And those are the symbols that we're getting a look at. But they're beyond, it's abstract thought. It's beyond the linguistic nature of how we think of things a lot of times, and like kind of stories and narrative in our minds. So we get this viewpoint of symbols, and these things have deeper meaning and deeper truth about us. And so because they have deeper meaning relating directly to us, because they're our subconscious symbols, of course, as human doers, we make us the center of the universe. And so we think that, I'm touching God because I'm touching something that has to do directly with me. You know what I mean? But I think that they're just like similar to symbols in a dream, but with a much more ability to control, navigate, and understand those in sort of a more literal type of way. I think if you're open to those things, those symbols, and you actually sidestep the romanticism of them, one, you won't go down a rabbit hole of self-delusion and start talking about how a scar that's healing is actually a mark from a past life or some silly nonsense like that. But that you can be open and learn about what perhaps your subconscious is trying to communicate to your conscious mind, and get a deeper sense of yourself and a deeper sense of your own truth.
I completely subscribe to that.
I really like that approach as well. And adding to that, what I really don't like, and I know Michel as well, is that you see this culture emerging around the ceremonies, and people like overly identify, well, their ego identifies with like a certain culture, and then you have even more symbols and more stories, and before you know it, it's completely covered in, well, I don't know, abstract, touched by God crystals.
Right.
Yeah. Have you been doing microdosing as well? Is it something you've tried? Okay.
No, I haven't done that. A lot of my friends seem to like that. I'm not really like as frequent with most mind altering things these days. In short summation, I guess at one point a couple of years ago, I realized that in the investigation of my own thoughts, that adding any intoxicant, regardless of what it is, creates a filter, adds a filter to that way of thinking. It influences your insight, your way of thinking. And really what I'm trying to do is just kind of Indiana Jones my own consciousness in the most raw and direct way, without any romanticism or filtration whatsoever, so that I can understand myself more deeply, understand the way I think, and then ultimately try and understand our world and my experience of it. And so, yeah, I like to try and get the raw story, from the brain there, and not that those things don't, help or don't have potential to help someone opening some of those doors. But I do think, as for me anyway, I understand what Alan Watts said, whatever he said, once you get the message, you should hang up the phone. And every once in a while I'll enjoy those things just for recreational purposes. Now that being said, I do have probably a drink every day, which always confuses people.
Alcohol.
Yeah,
well, why not? pick your poison, right?
Right. What's a plant medicine?
Yeah,
it's made out of corn.
One thing I was wondering about, though, in regard to the psychedelic experience, and like I said, I totally subscribe to your view on it being probably manifestations of your subconscious, and I really like the vision you sketch with, the bobbing of the containers. One common experience that people do tend to have, though, is this non-dualistic thing of ego dissolution and realizing, like, you're part of a bigger thing than just you as a human. The sense that you're part of, like, tribe Earth. Is that something, or like a phenomenon, that you recognize and that you perceive as valuable for, the next step in humanity?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's valuable, but it often comes with a new set of problems, because once you get a bit of vision outside of yourself and you see yourself from the outside a bit, then you move to step right up to the next phase, is dealing with your own ego and your own place in the universe. And that's a whole nother part of the path. And this is actually what, in my book that I just sold and I'm finishing up, called Now is the Way, it addresses that. It doesn't tell you that it's doing it, but the flow of how it goes is in my own experience of these things, of what's necessary and what you'll need in each step as you're doing this peeling of the onion. So it's working on the subconscious level of, like, okay, and now you get a sense of outside of yourself, but now you need to address your ego. And as you address your ego, you're going to need to learn how to plug your compassion into that. And then some meditation and mindfulness techniques will really help you balance all that out. So it's intentionally, taking you through this helpful path of what the next steps are. So yeah, it's super helpful to get a sniff of a world outside of yourself, but it often asks another question of you.
Yeah. So something I've been wondering about, also in relation to these bigger questions we have. You said something that really resonated with me, that the universe or nature gives zero fucks about you, right? I agree with that. I'm seeing this tendency in people that delve into these topics that you're into, that they lose something in terms of violence and aggression. Is that something you would agree to?
If
you get more mindful and more conscious that there's usually an element of aggression and violence that seems to like seep away with these people.
I think, I mean, not to generalize, but I would think so. In my experience, yeah,
right.
Because you can, the more you see outside of yourself, the more you can understand others and empathize a bit more, and you can kind of realize like, hey, we're all in this thing together, and I suffer and other people suffer, and you learn you'd like to mitigate other people's suffering because of that. And just being more mindful and having a positive intention, you also see that 99% of things that a person does that create suffering for them or those around them is actually just a road to an outcome that is unnecessary. And the more you realize that, the more you can live an intentional life without creating any suffering that isn't necessary.
I actually really like the way Aubrey Marcus also describes it. It's just you is just me living a different life.
Right.
And I think if I try to practice this, if you meet people or someone behaves in a certain way that's offensive to me or I don't like, and it's actually really quite helpful to look at it this way. And it makes you more empathic, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And less aggressive and less resentful. And
totally.
Those all sound like very noble. But the thing I was wondering about is it actually a beneficial strategy if you think about the fact that the universe is, it gives zero fucks, and with being less aggressive in a world that kind of rewards that, if you look at our economy or how nature works. I mean, alpha males in, for example, a wolf pack, they have to have a certain kind of aggression, and there's all kinds of threats from nature that we used to resolve with aggression, not to say tribal warfare and stuff like that. So I was wondering if removing the teeth and the claws from our mind, if that's actually a good idea, if you look at the kind of context that we're operating in. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I mean, I don't think that it has to be like either pudding or shrapnel. I think again, to take it to Alan Watts, he said you can get too gooey or you can get too prickly, but the good spot is to be prickly goo. Just realizing that, we're still animals, we're still human, regardless of all that. And going, with a positive, intention where you're not trying to harm other people is good. However, if you're walking down the street and someone comes up and tries to attack you, you should defend yourself. You know what I mean? And I think that as far as you mentioned, like in business, I look at someone like Gary V, Gary Vaynerchuk. You can be, passionate and driven, but driven from a sense of positivity and constructivism, as opposed to doing it to take out competitors or things of that nature. Also, I do have to wrap it up, guys. I have another podcast, but yeah. If thank you both so much, Janet and Michel, for having me on. I really do appreciate it.
Well, thank you too. It's been an honor to have you here, and I really hope if you visit the Netherlands, come swing by and say hi.
Absolutely, be my pleasure.
Yeah,
cool.
Man, I had a lot of fun.
Yes, thank you. And
yeah, I had a lot of fun too. Thank you both so much.